Okay, hello guys, I hope everyone is having a beautiful day. Today I just want to go through some really simple things that you can do food wise to fix your periods. So a lot of people who I know are listening to this, or who are interested in listening to this, are listening to this because you're struggling with your period. You're struggling with perhaps PMS symptoms, so sore breasts, irritable, angerness, like moodiness before your period, you bloating, those types of symptoms, PMS symptoms, as well as symptoms around when you actually get your period. So for anything from heavy periods to clotting, to more painful periods, and then more the other end of the spectrum in terms of more chronic conditions. Hi Christy. More chronic conditions like endometriosis, PCOS, fibroids, those types of things, which is all comes back to a lot of the time having period pain. You might have those, sometimes people have those conditions and they don't actually know they've got them. So I'm going to touch a little bit on that as well. But what we're really, the aim of the game is for today, and what I really want to help you understand is why, first of all, you're experiencing the problems that you're experiencing. So PMS and period symptoms. And I want you to walk away feeling like you realize that it doesn't actually have to be this way, because I have a lot of people, conversations with people lately who are experiencing these and they don't know what to do, but they also feel like there's an element of helplessness with it, going, oh my gosh, I'm just over it, but I actually don't know what to do, and don't realize that there is actually this whole possibility on the other side of really doing work around your health that can mean that you don't have to get painful, heavy periods, PMS symptoms, and it can be a complete game changer for a lot of people. So first of all, what I want you to understand is, if you're watching this, what I'm going to explain to you today is, first of all, what the drivers are of any type of period, heavy hormonal issue to do with our periods. And so if you can understand this, then it makes sense why we have to do what we have to do. Because if you don't understand the what, you're not going to understand why. Like, why do I need to eat these certain foods? Why should I be removing these certain foods from my diet if I want to fix my period? It doesn't make sense to me. And so I'm a real big believer of, we need to understand why. And if we understand that and what drives these conditions, then we'll be able to make a lot more sense for us to really be able to make healthy choices and be able to start moving in the steps towards the right direction. So first of all, when we're talking about any type of hormonal condition and any type of period pain, PMS, inflammation is the biggest, where's my marker gone? Inflammation is the biggest, is one of the biggest drivers for period issues. And there's a lot of things that drive inflammation, but inflammation, and I'm not talking about this type of inflammation that you have, say, when you break your ankle swells up and you have inflammatory, they call it inflammatory markers that go to that joint to stabilize it. That is acute inflammation. We need that, right? And there's an element of inflammation. Inflammation serves a purpose. It's part of our immune system. But I'm talking about long-term chronic inflammation that is more low grade, that can build up over time and actually then cascade into more chronic disease and other conditions. And in the context of this conversation, we're talking about things like PCOS, endometriosis, fibroids, painful periods, PMS symptoms, heavy periods, clotting, those types of things, which are all contributed to a lot of these things. So inflammation is one of the big drivers. And when we're talking about inflammation with any health condition, actually, inflammation is always one of the big drivers. Now, there's lots of different things that contribute to inflammation. Guys, by the way, if you're watching this and you've got questions, please post them in the comments and I will answer them as we go, or I will endeavour to answer them after the broadcast. So there's a lot of different things that cause inflammation. So inflammation is an immune response, okay, and it's there to basically protect, really. But there's a lot of things that also drive this inflammation to a point where then it can cause, dysfunction in the body, and it can cause problems. So high blood sugar is the first one. High blood sugar and irregulated blood sugar levels with any type of hormonal condition can really be a driver, particularly with PCOS, but it's also a case of high blood sugar levels with heavy periods, anyone with hormonal issues, with PMS symptoms, those types of things. Because insulin is a hormone. So when we're talking about hormones are chemical messengers. They're the ones that, go from A to B to communicate from one organ to the other organ, from one gland to the next gland. And they send messages around the body. And insulin is one of those big hormones that basically allows glucose to enter the cell. And so when there is too much elevated blood sugar levels, that causes inflammation. It causes inflammation in the blood vessels as well as in the cells, and it ultimately will get stored as fat because we don't have the use for that energy. And so there's a lot of damage that can be done over a long period of time, particularly if we've got elevated blood glucose levels all the time and we're on this roller coaster ride of getting quick fuel and then burning it off, and it basically gets stored as fat. We don't use it, which is then moves into this insulin resistance phase. So our cells become resistant to the insulin, which basically means someone's knocking at the door. Oh, sorry, Amanda. Hey, it's okay. Sorry, Ned thought that was... Ned, come here. Sit down. I shouldn't have done that. Anyway. Sit down. Nothing like a good live to make things interesting as well. Sit down. It's okay. It's no one at the door. So someone's knocking at the door, and yes, I know, someone's not literally knocking at the door, and someone inside has got the TV turned up loud. No, come here. This is Ned. Say hello. Yes, all right, in your bed. And so this is a big driver of hormonal imbalances, and I see it all the time, and so this is one of the things that needs to be addressed. And it's one of the big drivers. The other big driver of inflammation is leaky gut. So I've done a little diagram here of what leaky gut is. And leaky gut is basically when our digestion, like the cells in our small intestine, this is our small intestine. These are the little cells that line the small intestine. They're like little fingers, and they're actually, if we're going to be really technical, they're a bit more like finger-like projections. They're more like that. But then ultimately, this whole surface area is lined with cells. So this is this, right? These have little junctions for food to come through once it's been broken down to its finest form and go into the bloodstream and then be delivered to the cell. What happens is that these junctions, I'm going to move this, become a little bit bigger and they're more open than what they should normally be. So normally they'll open, close, open, close. We eat food, we break it down, they'll open a little bit more, they're like gatekeepers, they'll close. But there's a lot of things in our environment that will actually cause these to open and stay open, gluten being one of them. And so then we have bacteria, we have toxins, we have undesirable bacteria from our gut, from the balance of bacteria not being created properly. We also have secretions and things that our bacteria makes that change and aren't working as well as they should, that protects this layer. And so what happens is then when we've got all these undesirables coming in and having a little party, and they go into our bloodstream, and then our immune system sees it, and it will spike a response, and this is inflammation. It causes, it's like, this shouldn't be here, We need to get rid of it. We need to kill it off. This is what happens when a virus or a bacteria comes into our body that shouldn't be there, and it's not welcome, and our immune system is so smart and intelligent that this is what happens all day, every day. But there's things in there that are cause this to be more elevated. So the immune system is on full heightened alert and from a long amount of time, and then there's as a result a lot of dysfunction that can happen as a result of this. So this is leaky gut. This is what happens, okay? And so there's a lot of things that will cause this, which I'm going to talk about. Some of these are free radicals. So free radicals from the food we eat. So basically eating junk food, things like sugar, alcohol, different chemicals in our environment. They all cause free radicals. And what a free radical is basically it's missing. I'm going to get real geeky. It's missing an electron, and it needs to be stabilized, and it will steal an electron, because electrons like to be in pairs. When we're talking about a cell, we have a cell up here, and we have electrons floating around, and they like to be in pairs. They like to be even. If they're not even, they will then go and steal one from someone else, and that will cause damage. That's what free radical damage is. And so we need to eat lots of antioxidants, because the antioxidants donate an electron to the free radicals to mop up the mess. Okay, this causes inflammation because it causes damage to our cells. Okay, so you've got this combination of free radicals happening from the food we're eating, from from sun, from heavy metals, from chemicals, from pesticides, from things we're exposed to on a constant, ongoing basis, as well as stress. And stress causes when I'm talking about stress, I'm talking about mainly cortisol. And cortisol causes damage to the inside of this gut, like this. It causes damage, and it also causes inflammation. And so there's this whole cascade of things that happen as a result of this. So it's never just one thing, right? And then when I was talking about free radicals and the foods that cause damage to the gut and cause inflammation, fake foods, gluten, dairy, sugar, particularly for hormonal imbalances, as well as other toxins, so things in fake foods, synthetic sweeteners, colours, flavourings, artificial sweeteners, those types of things, as well as alcohol, as well as chemicals in our skincare, as well as pesticides in our food. There's a whole range. Heavy metals is a big one, and the crap in your water is a big one as well, because there's a lot of those, as well as BPA, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, because that goes into this world of xenoestrogens. So all these things in combination can really add up, and they really cause a long-term, low-grade or then high-grade level of inflammation, which can then cascade into a whole range of different things depending on the individual. And then that then comes down to genetics, what genes get varied, whether you've got, say, for example, a gene for celiac disease versus a gene for you're more susceptible to developing, say, endometriosis, for example. There's lots of other things that contributed to it, but this is what I want you to understand. Now, this whole situation here, right here, is also known as epigenetics. And epigenetics means above genetics. So we have our genes. They can be switched on and switched off. There's our thoughts can switch them on and off. Our food and our environment can switch them on and off. Our air, our water, the sun, like there's so many different things that can switch on and off. It's the environment. And when we're even talking about stress, I'm not just talking about, there's stresses from the environment that we're in. There's good stress and there's also bad stress. We need stress in our life. Our body needs to be put under certain types of pressure to be able to improve. For example, exercise is a really good example of this. Cold showers is a good example of this, like really pushing yourself to your edge, learning something new. Like there's different types of stresses that will push you to your edge, but then there's also stresses that cause the body to be inflamed. Cortisol being one of those. stress in terms of the stories that we tell ourselves, the I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, and this can go back into generational as well. All of this is epigenetics, how our genes are expressed. Okay, so I just want you to understand that there's a lot of different factors adding up to this, and it's really important. Summer says, 15-year-old daughter, painful periods, addiction to anything sweet or heavy carbs. Honestly believes she's insulin resistance, makes perfect sense. Eats a large amount of fruit. Does this contribute? Oh, hang on, let me just read the rest of that message. Does this contribute or mainly processed foods? Look, I think fruit for the moment, when we're talking about insulin resistance, depends how bad the insulin resistance is. If they're eating a lot of fruit and they're also eating a lot of processed carbs, it's still going to come back to the processed carbs. I think some people work well depending on what's going on with them and how insulin resistant is to choose more of the less starchy or less high sugar fruits, such as example berries, or pears, or lemons, limes, avocado, tomato. They're all fruits, by the way. Rather than going, I'm just going to eat a whole heap of fruit. Having said that, I really am still going to be a fan of going, let's just eat real food and shift the dial. So it comes down to the individual and what works for the person. And some people respond really well to shifting and changing their hormones by having less fruit in their diet. And then there's this whole paradigm of also going too low carb and not having enough carbohydrate that can also that cause hormonal issues as well with women. So it is a balance, and it's about going, okay, let's just fix up all the other stuff first rather than worrying about the fruit. And maybe for example, if she's eating a lot of fruit, maybe she's not getting enough protein in her diet or enough good fats, which is a real then you'll get that constant high and low, because you need the protein to keep you sustained as well as the fat to keep you sustained. So I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. So that inflammation is the big driver. Then when we're moving on to the estrogen dominance is one of the other big drivers of period issues. When I'm talking about this, even PCOS, which is more androgen driven, so it means more of the testosterone hormones, there can also be estrogen dominance going on. But this is, oh, I can't do that, the dog is going to go off. This is a real problem. And so what happens is, I mentioned this before, there's this class of chemicals called xenoestrogens. And what xenoestrogens are is basically, these are chemicals in our environment that mimic estrogen in the body. And so this includes things like BPA in phthalates in plastic, or Ned. Yeah, Ned's a good guard dog. Pesticides in food, different chemicals in our environment that are xenoestrogens. There's a lot of different ones. BPA is a big one, and the phthalates is a big one too, which is a big driver. A lot of different chemicals in our skincare and cosmetics can be a big one, as well as pesticides in all sorts of things, including even things like tampons, because if your tampons or sanitary pads aren't organic, you're getting them, and they're cotton. They could also be synthetic, from synthetic fibers like polyester, but you will be getting xenoestrogens in them because they've got really highly sprayed in pesticides. Okay, so this is something really important to understand. This is why, if you've seen any of my other video content, I harp on about water, drinking clean filtered water, because there's a really high level of BPA. I know in Sydney for a fact that they've found BPA in Sydney Harbour, high levels of BPA in the water in Sydney Harbour. So it's everywhere. So we've really got to filter this out, because this is one part. The other, alcohol is a xenoestrogen. Like, there's so many different things, right? But the problem is, this is what happens. We have these extra levels of estrogens in our body. Estrogen, how you want to say it, whatever country you're in. And what happens is, it's up to our liver to clear that out. And so if the liver isn't working as well as it should, and with the liver, we have 3 phases. There's phase 1, there's phase 2, there's phase 3. And what happens is often it's almost like a traffic jam, you know, when you've got a traffic jam, and there'll be all these pathways, and there's a bit of a block. So phase 1 will be really good, and then phase 2 not so good. And what happens is phase 2, like they've sort of like undone all the chemicals and put them into a different form, including the estrogens, and the liver can't deal with it, so then it will send it back around the body to deal with it later, hoping that it will be able to process it later, and it doesn't happen. And so we've then got elevated levels of estrogens or xenoestrogens that the body thinks is estrogen, so then it starts to behave in a way as though the estrogen is elevated, right? And so then what happens is then we get things like heavy periods, PMS symptoms, fibroids, endometriosis. Endometriosis has also got a lot of other immune issues happening with it. But this estrogen dominance is one of the big drivers. So it then comes back to how well is your liver working and how well is your gut working, because what happens is the liver and the gut work in synergy together. If the gut isn't working in terms of if you're constipated, you're not clearing out what you need to, if you're not making enough bile, which comes from the liver, that then goes into your small intestine and out, into large intestine, and then it is turns into poop. You're not going to get out a lot, because the liver will dump toxins into the bile, and that's how it comes out through the digestive tract. So these two need to be working in a good relationship with each other, which basically means if your bowels aren't moving and you're not having a decent bowel movement, a normal bowel movement every day, you're not going to be clearing out the hormones on the level that you should be. So that's one. And then it comes also back to the liver, is the liver overburdened with all of these, as well as does it need a little bit extra support? Is it a bit sluggish? Are these pathways working as well as they should? Because then this is where it comes out, because this is a whole chemical process that happens of converting things out of the blood into the bile and dumping it into the bile, so it can then be excreted. Okay, so this process is really important that we get this right, and this is what's happening with a lot of us when we have issues with our period. And so if we want to fix our period, we need to be working on the liver and on the gut, and that also comes back to reducing the inflammation. How do you reduce the inflammation? You work on the liver and the gut, and you do a lot of work on, first of all, removing a lot of these things, as well as adding in more of what you need, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. Okay, so that's the second one. The third, other underlying driver of this is nutritional deficiencies. So nutritional deficiencies, I'm talking about vitamins and minerals, and so we need lots of different vitamins and minerals. I've listed some. There's probably some missing here, but zinc, magnesium, vitamin A, D, C, E, thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, biotin, pantothenic acid, B6, folate, and B12. These are all your B vitamins. Sorry, terrible writing. Vitamin A is a fat soluble. Vitamin D we synthesize from the sun. C and E, or E is fat soluble as well, and C is water soluble. These are all water soluble. All of these you get from leafy green vegetables and plants, as do these. Zinc and magnesium is a mineral. And so we need all of these in order for the liver and the gut to work properly. We need these for the thyroid, like zinc, magnesium, iodine and selenium. I didn't write that as well, which is iodine, selenium, for healthy thyroid function, B vitamins for energy production, for our liver to work properly. Like everything works in synergy, and they're needed in lots of different things. For our nervous system to function and work at properly, we need magnesium. Now what depletes magnesium is high levels of stress. and our nervous system can't function properly if we haven't got high levels of magnesium, and neither can a lot of other functions in our body. This is responsible for over 300 reactions in the body, and we need magnesium, really super important. Our minerals, our vitamins and minerals in our soils are very deficient, particularly in Australia. And so we're also getting nutrient deficient food, as well as we're not getting in enough nutrients, as well as when the vegetables get picked and the fruit gets picked, it's picked when it's not ripe, and then it's put in cold storage, and potentially treated with lots of different things. So there's a lot of different things going on, but here, these are the 3 drivers of your period. Now, I don't want you to feel overwhelmed by this, but the thing that's cool about this is, and I really want to make sure I get this point home, is there's a lot of things you can also do, and so you have power to do a lot of things about this and shift this and move the dial on this. Because inflammation, estrogen dominance, and all nutritional deficiencies, if they're all addressed at the same time, you can shift the dial and your periods will get better, right? With things like endometriosis, I did a video recording a little while ago on endometriosis, and it's like, okay, if you've got endometriosis, it can go into remission. It doesn't mean won't have it, but it can definitely go to sleep, so to speak. Not for everyone, but or even your symptoms can be dramatically improved. So everyone is individual. It depends on what's going on in the body. It depends on what's going on for the person. But I just want to allow you to realize that you have power to do something about this, and it's not something that you need to put up with, and it's not something that you just have to suffer with for the rest of your life, or for the rest of your fertile years, and then go into menopause and have a horrific menopause. The way someone goes into menopause is also very reflective of how they are in their reproductive years. So just keep a note of that. So all of these are big factors. So when we're talking about, okay, what foods do I eat if I want to improve my period? This sounds so obvious, but there's a lot of things we've really got to go back to basics and going, okay, if I know that things like pesticides and eating fake foods are going to cause inflammation and cause estrogen dominance, how do I do that? Okay, well, I start to get in more living foods into my diet. Hopefully as much as organic produce as you possibly can. If that's not in the budget, that's okay. You may want to follow the clean 15 and dirty dozen as a guide to go, okay, well, maybe I'm going to buy organic celery and not organic, but bananas. Or, there's different things that you might choose over that, which is sometimes what I do as well. I do try and buy a lot of organic produce as much as possible. You've got to be smart and savvy about it, but also remember that you're voting with your dollar. So the more people that buy and demand this, the better it will become. But when I was talking about the soil before, you've got to think about that, what your food is being grown in, or what you're eating. If you're eating animal products, what they're eating. So as much as organic as possible, as much living food as possible, as much above ground plants as possible. And one thing that will really support the liver is lots of cruciferous vegetables, preferably cooked, because lots of raw cruciferous vegetables may cause issues. But lots of cruciferous vegetables, because they've got sulfur in them, and that helps the liver detoxify and become more efficient. So lots of cruciferous vegetables, making sure you're getting in lots of fiber. So if you are constipated, you want to go and do something about that. And then you might want to also add in bitter foods to aid digestion. So things like lemon, peppery, spicy foods, not so much spicy, things like bitter rocket, dandelion greens, dandelion tea, tea is another good one, apple cider vinegar, lemon, lime, those types of things, as well as herbs and spices to help digestion. And then if you do eat meat, grass-fed meats and organic eggs, wild grass-fed, wild fish, if you eat fish and oily fish. For example, with things like salmon in Australia, we can't get wild salmon unless it's frozen here, so I always go for Huon brand or King Island salmon from New Zealand, because they're the ones that have been fed the better food, as opposed to Tassel that feeds them GMO pellets and things like that. So you're not just what you eat, you are what you eat eats too, right? So that's sort of giving you a real rundown. You know, sugar is a big driver. Gluten and dairy you want to avoid. And the reason I say gluten and dairy is because, back to this leaky gut, gluten is a big driver of inflammation and causes leaky gut. And women, I find, with hormonal issues will do benefit without having the dairy in their life. Now, a lot of people will then say, how do I get my calcium? It's like if you're eating a plant, like a predominantly plant-based diet with lots of variety, you should be able to get enough calcium in from that. However, there are exceptions to the rule, and it also comes down to the individual. So I hope that is helpful. If you've got any questions, please let me know. But you know, most of the focus of today was going, okay, I just want you to understand what the drivers are of these hormonal conditions, because then when you're going, yeah, well, okay, yeah, this is why I do need to maybe try and bring in some more leafy greens to my diet. I need to have more foods that have fiber in them. Maybe you want to, you know, have a little bit of pumpkin or sweet potato. I'm going to do another training on understanding your cycle and how to sync to your cycle and live according to your cycle, because we have different needs at different times of the month. But if you can understand this, then when you're making decisions, it's like, okay, can I have predominantly plants, good fats, and grass-fed or an organic animal products if I choose. Avoid dairy, avoid gluten. But there's a lot of other things that come down to the individual, and we need to make sure the gut and the liver is working as well. But that's your baseline as a place to start. So if you've got any questions, please let me know. Finally, I've got an offer this month for if you want to work with me and hop on a call, we can have a quick chat. But I'm doing an offer of a first initial consult for $120. So it's normally $220. So if you want to book in with me, I'm talking about Australian dollars too, by the way, just post a yes in the comments or DM me, and we'll get you booked in. And that's pretty much it. I don't really have anything else, because, you know, it can be really hard to do it on your own. You know, I've been through this. I've struggled with lots of different hormonal imbalances and healing my gut and healing my liver, and you don't want to be doing it on your own. It's like anything. If we want to be good at something, we need to follow the path of someone who has walked it before us, and it is a whole lot easier to do that rather than trying to work it out and figure it out on your own. And I do also think that when it comes down to this part, doing testing, functional testing as well, is really important, so you're not just guessing and taking stabs in the dark, which is what a lot of people do, and which is why they struggle. So if that resonates, please comment, and you want to have a chat and potentially, you know, come up with a bit of a plan of what this could look like for you, then reach out to me. But I will see you all soon. This broadcast is going to be a regular thing now at the same time every Wednesday. So I'll see you next week. Bye.